When I first got into CrossFit and I started following all these benchmark workouts, I actually got weaker. I got worse. I was like, all right, this is not working. I basically got back into traditional strength conditioning, and that's the approach I took to compete in CrossFit. Principle number one is, if the food did not exist 200 years ago, do not eat it. Principle number two, if the food did not directly come from an animal or was not directly grown from the ground, don't eat it. And principle number three, every time you eat, prioritize protein. If you follow those three nutrition principles, you'll never fail.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Tanner Shuck. Is that pronounce that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dubai fitness champion and strength coach, online trainer, content creator, former Division I football player, and founder of True Strength.
Yes, sir.
I'll leave anything out of there?
No, you got that correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where I like to jump off with you guys is you played Division I football. I'm always interested in what your sporting background was when you were a kid.
For sure.
So if we go all the way back to pre-junior high.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Yeah. What kind of sports? And the reason I ask is because that values are created when you're younger.
Absolutely.
But there's also opportunities or windows to develop certain characteristics.
Absolutely.
If it's visual acuity, explosive strength,
right,
all that, it happens young. Not that you can't, we all know that, not that you can't develop it later, but
right,
you compromise your cap.
Absolutely.
If it's not done in the right developmental phase.
Right.
So if we go way back, what were the things that you were doing?
I was very fortunate. So I grew up playing soccer as a kid, just 5, 6, 7, 8. And then when I was 9 years old, I decided I wanted to play football. And I was very lucky because I had really good parents. And my dad, he's a power lifter. He grew up powerlifting, and he literally wouldn't let me play football unless I got in shape and started training for it. And so when I was 9 years old, I started lifting weights. Mm-hmm. And the first exercise my dad ever taught me was a back squat. So I grew up in a gym, and he was a welder and fabricator, and he outfitted a gym in our garage. He built all the equipment himself, and he taught me squat, bench, deadlift. And so I was training from 9 years old, lifting weights.
So how did you take to it? Is it something that you wanted to do, or?
I loved it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I was really given a choice either. And I was kind of just thrown in there because I wanted to play football because that's what all my friends were doing. And my dad said, "You're not playing football unless you get in shape. Like, you're gonna get ready for it. You're not just gonna go in there and be like any other kid. You're gonna get ready and prepare." And so I didn't really have a choice, but that's all I knew at the time as well.
So how did that play out in Pee Wee League? Because a lot of times the stronger kids usually going to get thrown on the line.
I was an O-line. You're exactly right. Yeah, you know the story. So I played Pop Warner football when I was 9 and 10 years old. I started off playing offensive tackle. I was one of the bigger kids. Not that I'm a big guy, but I was one of the bigger kids at the time. I played offensive tackle, and then I played linebacker too. I played both ways. I mean, I was a kid. I played offensive tackle, and I was just one of the bigger, stronger kids because, I was lifting weights a little bit, and it really helped my development. I think I was kind of an early bloomer as well. I just kind of mature a little bit earlier than other kids. Mm-hmm. I've been 5'11" probably since I was 14 or 15 years old. Didn't really get much taller.
Well, it serves you well then.
Yeah, it did. So it worked out well, but basically all I've ever done is train and work out. I've kind of grew up in the gym, and it's all I've ever known, and it's all I've ever wanted to do. That's the only thing I've ever been interested in.
So were you linebacker then through middle school?
So oddly enough, I grew up in Alaska, played youth football in Alaska. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had aspirations to play Division I college football. Getting recruited from Alaska is next to impossible. So I knew that if I wanted to take football seriously, I was going to have to get back, to the contiguous United States. And so I went back to Oklahoma specifically, and I moved in with my aunt and uncle because they were in a good school district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I moved to Jenks High School, which was one of the premier high school football programs in the United States.
How old were you then?
I was 14.
Okay.
I went there and played. We'll back up a little bit.
Yeah.
My dad purposely held me back in school. So I would have another year to develop, so I'd have a better chance of getting recruited. Mm-hmm. So I sat out 1 year of school when I was in middle school, which was really kind of hard when you're a kid. I was 13.
Yeah.
Taken out of school. in 8th grade. And I moved school districts in Alaska, got put back into 7th grade, and then did that for a year. Then I moved down to Oklahoma. I moved down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, moved in with my aunt and uncle because my dad, he couldn't get a job in Tulsa. So he went and got a job in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Moved in with my aunt and uncle. So I was in the right school district so I could go play football at Jinx High School. Played 8th grade football there.
Well, how was that change?
It was pretty drastic.
I mean, you're going from living with one family to another.
It was really drastic, but my dad, he did so much for me. I can't thank him enough still to this day. And, he gave me his word that, you know, hey, if you want to go play college football, I'll do whatever it takes to get you there. So he quit his job. He had a great job in Alaska, moved me down to live with my aunt and uncle. He got a job that he didn't even want, working in Fayetteville, Arkansas, so he could come watch me play football, you know, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So
how did you take that pressure?
I responded to it pretty well because my dad, he ingrained a really strong work ethic in me from a very young age. And so my attitude and my approach was always just, I'm going to do whatever it takes to outwork everyone. And that's kind of what I did all through high school.
What'd that look like on the team?
I was just more developed, stronger, probably a little bit more mature.
Were they all working hard though?
The level of football definitely down south compared to up in Alaska. And I think other parts of the United States as well was, I think, higher.
Okay.
Jinx High School, they were one of the premier, probably top 25 high school programs in the country when I was coming up. And
so yeah, they were kind of recruiting.
They were. And I also knew, my dad and I knew that if I wanted a chance to get recruited, I was going to have to go play for a good program just to get noticed. Mm-hmm. And so I moved down there as an 8th grader, had a really good middle school year of football. And then I was one of the only freshmen to play on the varsity football team at Jinx. So that worked out well. So I didn't play on the freshman team. I played on the varsity team and I started as a freshman.
How did the schools break? Was the junior high 7, 8, and 9?
It was 7, 8.
Okay.
And then,
so you were in the same school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I played 1 year in middle school and I was arguably probably one of the best players on my team.
Yeah.
And then I was the only freshman in my class that went up to play with the sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Okay.
At Jinx High School. And so I played as a true freshman.
But you're still seeing everybody in the halls. And
yeah. So the way Jinx worked, we had like this school, it was a freshman academy. So the whole school was just 9th graders. Mm-hmm. And then the high school was 10th, 11th, 12th. Okay. So I went to school in the freshman academy my first year, but I would, instead of going to the freshman football practice, I would go to the varsity football practice.
Okay. All right. The reason I asked is because when I came up through, it was kind of the same situation, but our junior high was 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
Right. So all my friends, if you want to call them that I was hanging around with, were different.
Right.
Than when I'd have to go to practice, which
right.
was, you know, mine was
the same. So I was playing football with all kids older than me, you know, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. And, you know, I was the only freshman on the team, but it was, they were welcoming, you know, and luckily they embraced me, and, you know, I was able to get on the field and perform. So
but you got to earn their respect a little bit differently than
I kind of did that with practicing harder than everyone. And I got on the field as a true freshman. And so I was fortunate, but I mean, I worked for it. So,
yeah. What was the strength and conditioning like there?
In my high school, I think it was pretty good, you know, as far as high school. You know, we were squatting, deadlifting, power cleaning. We had a dedicated strength and conditioning coach. And then some of our football coaches also helped out with the strength and conditioning program. So it was good, but I did a lot of my strength and conditioning work outside of football, you know, in the off season. Like I've always trained. I grew up squatting and deadlifting. And so my senior year, I was really about the same size as I am now. It's about 205 pounds, and, you know, same height, but I was probably the strongest, one of the most athletic kids on my team. And that helped a lot, just because, man, when you're stronger, I feel like you're better at everything.
Yeah. You
really are. And I did a lot of, you know, obviously sport specific training as well for football. And I played defensive end in high school. That's just where they put me. I was, you know, pretty, I guess, tenacious player. And I played D end, and I was fortunate to get recruited, you know, by some, you know, Division I programs, and they weren't recruiting me as a defensive end. They recruited me as a linebacker, and that's what I ended up playing in college.
Now, when you went to that next step, is that Was your height then an issue?
It was somewhat, but I mean, I never really played any defensive end in college. I played a little bit my freshman year, but I ended up redshirting because I injured my ankle coming home from study hall. I was doing a little bit of off the edge, like pass rushing my true freshman year, and I was playing on special teams. But, you know, because I just didn't have the height, then I played linebacker. So then there was a transition phase where, you know, taking my hand off the ground. And
well, defensive end's kind of it's a weird position based upon the
it's
offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and the defense. Yeah, right. So it depends on what scheme you're running. We ran a 4-2-5 in college. So they would bring me in, you know, maybe on just some pass rushing situations. But then my sophomore, junior, senior year, I played mainly linebacker.
And then what was the strength and conditioning like in college?
I was extremely fortunate. I feel like, again, I think I had one of the best college football strength coaches in the country. His name was Yancey McKnight. And I have the utmost respect for that man. And he came from Oklahoma State. He left after our sophomore year because he got a better job to go coach at Iowa State. And then he went to University of Texas as well. I think he's no longer in college football strength conditioning because he had a couple sons and he kind of just wanted to do their strength conditioning for their high school. But he's one of the just most hard-nosed, dedicated, disciplined men that I've ever met. And our entire football team looked up to him and respected him more than any other coach on the staff, even more than the head coach.
Well, the strength coach spends more time with players.
Absolutely. That was a big reason why my dad, he wanted me to go to Rice University, because my dad, he was in the know, and he knew that the strength conditioning coach was really the coach you're going to spend the most time with. And so my dad he had the best rapport with that strength coach, Yancey McKnight, and he was just no nonsense. Like, I really sincerely hope that Yancey McKnight listens to this podcast someday, because he had an indelible impact on my life. Just, you know, work ethic, discipline, you know, no excuses, and just a very, very strong mindset, and just no bullshit. Excuse me.
Yeah.
You know, nothing like that. So, you know, he set the tone for our team. And like I said, every player on our team looked up to him and respected him more than anyone. And so it was just and the quality of training was incredible as well. Like, we got strong as shit, you know, from our freshman year to our sophomore year, all the way up, you know, till we were seniors. I wish I would have got to, you know, play under him my entire career, but I was fortunate, you know, my freshman and sophomore year, and a couple of my best friends, we were just, you know, we loved the weight room. And he just got us really, really strong, and just established a very, very strong work ethic and mindset, and kind of just the attitude just to love the weight room and put in the work there, and just to be as strong and athletic as we possibly could be.
So if we were to balance out, you know, the passion for the weight room and the passion for football, where was it at that time?
I would say I didn't have the greatest college football experience. So I always felt like I thrived more in the weight room, just because I saw eye to eye with my strength coaches more so than my position coach. You know, and I think the position coaches, they're football coaches. Yeah. And I didn't have the greatest, like I said, I didn't have the greatest college football experience because of I played under one position coach all 5 years when I was there, and our personalities kind of clashed. I was a very positive, hardworking kid, and my coach wasn't that way. He was real old, real negative. And so I didn't enjoy college football. And that wasn't to say that every other player on my team had the same experiences. Yeah. It was really just, you know, who your position coach was. But I loved the weight room. My strength coaches, they loved me too. I had a good strength coach my junior and senior year too. His name was Jared Kaihalo. He was a really good coach as well. And my strength coaches, they loved me. And I was always just, I love the weight room. And I kind of knew, you know, once I finished playing college football that, all right, if I'm not going to be able to play football professionally, then I'm going to do strength conditioning somehow, some way.
Well, the difference is in the weight room, the harder and smarter you work, you personally know the return.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you have control over it.
You have control over it. I had
control over that.
We're on the field, maybe not so much, but no. It's also another reason why a lot of multi-sport players, say in high school, you know, wrestlers may be a good example. You know, they wrestle and play football, but they bust their ass.
Absolutely.
But everybody on the team doesn't bust their ass.
No.
So like, what am I doing this for?
Right.
Right. So they fall more into that independent sport.
And there wasn't everyone on our team that were as hardworking as I was.
Yeah.
Really probably three of us or 4 of us. Like there was 4 guys on my football team at Rice University. 3 out of the 4 went on to play in the NFL. I was the one that didn't make it, but we all loved the weight room, and we were all just very, I don't know if we were mature, we were just disciplined, but we knew the harder we worked, the better results we'd get, you know, and that's just kind of the way it went for us. And so we always loved the weight room. We were kind of pretty quickly established as kind of, you know, leaders on the team. I wouldn't say I was a leader on the team on the field, but probably more so in the weight room, you know.
Well, I'm going to assume from what you're saying that you took to the lifestyle.
I absolutely
because
did.
It's a grind lifestyle.
I absolutely did. And I was also, thankfully I was pretty mature. I knew that our strength coaches, they would fuck with us big time. They would play all kinds of mind games with us, you know, and just to prepare us. But I knew their job, they were there to get us stronger, fitter, you know, become better athletes. That was their sole purpose for us. And I think college football strength conditioning, in my opinion, that's almost from my experience, that's the epitome of strength conditioning. In the NFL, it's not like that, you know, and I knew that was their job. And so I knew what they were doing is they were just trying to make us better. And they did whatever they had to do to play mind games with us to get us prepared and to you know, to turn us into men, if that makes sense. So it was, I'll cherish that experience forever because like I said, it changed my life. You know, I had a very good upbringing with my dad. I was always very hardworking, always in the weight room. And then I had some really good strength coaches in college that, you know, kind of just further ingrained that lifestyle and that mindset into me. Yeah. You know, and then I had my best friends too. My best friends still to this day, you know, they're still just really hardworking guys. And this is after their NFL careers and everything. And they're still taking great care of themselves. You know, one of my other best friends, he played in the NFL for 12 years. The other one played for 7 years. The other one played for 5. And we're all still in really good shape, you know, because it kind of, you know, it turned us into who we are.
How did you were younger at the time, so how did you manage the guys that weren't doing or training hard?
I think we really just tried to lead, you know, we led by example. And, you know, the other guys on our team, they knew that the way we trained and our mindset, they knew it was the right way to go about it. And I think we just kind of led by example, and they kind of followed in those footsteps a little bit. I feel like it might be kind of a characteristic trait as well, you know, that you might be born with, that you love the weight room and you want to go in there, and every day you're going in there to get better. You know, it's not because you have to be there, it's because you want to be there. And not everyone has that, but you know, when I was coming up, I felt like a lot of the players that saw my friend, like me, my other good friend Scott Solomon, Andrew Sendejo, James Casey, they looked up to and respected us because those guys were some of the best players on our team. So the other players, while they may not have had the same work ethic, I think they worked harder because they saw us working hard too. So I think there was definitely a carryover, and it really helped the team for sure.
Well, when we say work ethic with those guys, they probably did on the field because that's what they truly loved the most. Yeah. So the strength and conditioning was just the shit that they had to do.
Right.
You know, so that work ethic would be like, is this even necessary type attitude? But, you know, enough to satisfy the coaches.
Some of that was there, but because Yancey, and he didn't even let us call him Coach McKnight. We always called him by his first name, Yancey. I don't know how to describe it, but just, you know, as soon as he would step into the weight room, everyone would stand up. You know, like we just had the utmost reverence for him. So, and no one would want to let him down, whether it was in the weight room or on the field, because our strength coaches would be at all our football practices as well, you know. And so we trained hard and we practiced hard. We didn't have the best. I played at Rice University. You know, it's the second smallest Division I university, you know, in the country. We went to a bowl game my sophomore year. We didn't have the greatest team, but you know, we were decent. But we all practiced really hard, and it's hard to compare because I didn't go to school, you know, at a big time program like Alabama, you know, or Florida or anything like that. But we took it very seriously, and I played with a lot of guys that made it to the NFL. So, you know, I played around some athletes, and we trained hard and we practiced hard.
Yeah, I know this is where the podcast stops and the ad starts, and most of you guys just want to skip ahead. But hang on, because this one actually matters to me. You all know who John Meadows was. John and I were very close friends. So I'm proud to partner with Granite, which was his company. The principles and values that he had as a person, he instilled into the company. The Meadows whey protein, it's just simply whey. The way that I use that is right after training because I want it to digest faster. I want it to get into my system faster. The other product is creatine, which is like a no-brainer at this point. Everybody should use creatine. Even if they don't train, everybody should be using creatine just for the neural benefits associated with that. Right now, you can get 10% off with code TABLETALK at granitenutrition.com. If you've ever respected John, this is how we keep his legacy alive.
So what were you studying while you were in college?
Football.
That's
No, I'm
like, no, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Basket weaving.
Yeah, basket weaving. No. So my best friend, Scott, I was just trading with him a couple days ago in Oklahoma City, but that was literally his major. His major was football. His major was political science. And he got through it. We went to Rice was a pretty difficult school, to be honest. You know, like studying, we had to study and we had to go to class, and, you know, the academic requirements to even get a scholarship at Rice, you had to perform pretty well in high school just to get accepted into the university. So we all went to class, and I think a lot of players did the bare minimum. They skated by. I majored in pretty much, it was the football major. It was sport management. I got a double major, sport management, managerial studies, and then I got a minor in business. And then I just became a CrossFit coach. You know?
Yeah. I was going to say, what happened after college? Because did you have aspirations to go to the NFL?
I absolutely did, you know, but the writing was on the wall. Like I didn't get a chance to play much in college just because I think there were some other things going on that, you know, it's not really important to get into, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to make a career from playing football. And so
when did you know that? At what
probably
point?
in 2011, 2012.
So as a junior?
Yeah, probably about that. Yeah. And then that was kind of right when CrossFit kind of started coming onto the scene. And I remember going into my senior year, we were at summer school doing training, getting ready for our last season of football. I saw CrossFit on ESPN, and I immediately knew from the moment I saw it, I was like, all right, fuck it. If I'm not playing football, then I'm just going to work out. I'm going to do that. Because I knew that I loved working out, and I knew I could work out fast, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I was like, all right, well, my best friends, they're going to go to the NFL. I knew they were. And I was like, I'm not doing that, but I'm going to do the next best thing that I could. And so there was never any doubt in my mind. I knew I was never cut out to get a real job. And so then once I finished up playing college football, I just immediately got into competitive CrossFit. And so that's kind of how my transition went. Because if I wouldn't have got into CrossFit, then I would have became a strength conditioning coach. I would have became a graduate assistant at some probably Division I program, and I just would have done whatever I had to do to stay in the weight room. Because
did you know what that lifestyle was like?
I had a pretty good idea because we had graduate assistants, you know, at our school. And I know those guys were like pretty much the punching bags. You know,
well, it's a full-time job as a player, but then when you look at what the strength coach's job is, like now when you look back, you're like, oh my God.
No, it's not easy. You definitely got to pay your dues. You know, work your way up. But I would have been more than happy to do that. And so when I finished up playing football, because of CrossFit, I saw that there was like a competitive outlet that I could actually go into after football. And I mean, you could make a little money doing it. And I was thinking, dude, if I can get paid to work out, fuck it, I'm going to do that. And then if that didn't work out, then I would just go back and play, you know, or be a football strength conditioning coach, or just, you know, any kind of strength conditioning coach, whether it was at the high school level, college, didn't matter to me.
So how did you decide where to go?
So long story short, because I went to pretty good school, I felt like a lot of external pressure to kind of graduate and get a good job, you know, making whatever, 6 figures right out of college, because that's what a lot of my teammates did. And, you know, there's a lot of networking that goes on with Rice University. It's a pretty good school. And so a lot of my teammates, they got hooked up with pretty good jobs, whether it was selling insurance, you know, being an engineer, going into, you know, petroleum or oil. And that just never interested me ever. And I remember I went out to lunch my senior year with my strength conditioning coaches, and I asked them, because I knew I wasn't going to play football, and I was asking them, hey man, what do I got to do to get to this job? And, you know, do you think it's a good move for me? And my strength coach, Jared Kahela, I'll never forget it. He looked at these guys, you know, in suit and ties, and it's like, never once in my life have I ever wondered what it's like to be them. And that's no knock to anyone with a professional career that goes into the corporate world. It's not a knock. I just knew I wasn't cut out for it. So what I ended up doing is I got a job at H&P Drilling, which was it's a oil company based in Tulsa, as a roughneck. And the reason that made sense to me at the time, because I knew that I could work 2 weeks on and then 2 weeks off, and I would be making pretty good money, and I would have the time that I was off, I could freaking train for CrossFit and compete. And so I did that for 1 month. That was very short lived, but it was one of the best experiences of my life because it taught me exactly what I did not want to do.
Well, which was harder work, the training or that?
Oh man, I wouldn't say the work, as a roughneck was necessarily hard. It was very long hours, and I was very out of my element. I was the only guy, as a roughneck that had a college degree, and all the roughnecks there, they're a pretty rough crowd. You're surrounded by a bunch of probably convicts, guys that might have kind of rednecks, if that makes sense, but they make good money, and those guys work really hard. So nothing but respect to them. That wasn't for me. And when I was there working the 2 weeks on, you'd work all day and I'd be covered in oil-based mud. I'd have to shower with Dawn dish soap to get all the dirt and grime off of me. And I didn't have time to train because I'd be working 13, 14 hours a day. And then the only thing you'd want to do is just go to sleep and get ready for the next day work. And you're working 14 days straight, and you're on your feet wearing coveralls, work boots, hard hat, and everything like that. And I was like, man, did I really go to college to get this kind of job? And it was kind of a rude awakening. And so it made me realize, all right, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I didn't have as much time to train. Can you imagine just training hard for 2 weeks and then not doing anything for 2 weeks? That's not really conducive to getting really, really fit, especially because I was getting out of college football, getting out of football training, getting in more into CrossFit training. And so then I thought, all right, well, maybe I'll be a fireman, because that was another job where you could work, you could have different hours where you allow you enough time to train. And so then I started trying to apply to be a firefighter in Oklahoma City, but that's a pretty competitive gig to get as well. And then fate kind of took me outside the United States. That's when I left the US. My parents were divorced, and my dad, he's retired, and he spends half his time in the Philippines, just enjoying his life. And so my dad said, hey, before you get a job and start a career, come out to the Philippines and just experience this, because it might be the only opportunity you have. So I went out there just on like a 6-week vacation, completely lost in life. I think I was 22 or 23 years old. Didn't know what I wanted to do besides work out. And so I went to the Philippines, and I was on this kind of remote island, and I would literally just make my dad take me around and train all day. I was running up hills, pushing trucks up hills, working out at this only gym they had, and it was a shitty gym. Couldn't train the way I wanted to train. And then I made my dad fly me to another island where the biggest city in the Philippines is Manila, because there was only one CrossFit gym there at the time. It was the only place that I could drop weights, where I could do Olympic lifting. And I walked into that gym, and thankfully I was able to kind of train the way I wanted to train. And then one thing led to the next. There was a guy there who's still my best friend to this day. He lives in Dubai with me. He's from Canada. He was probably 25 or 26 at the time. He was coaching at a CrossFit gym there. He got there kind of coincidentally as well. And he was leaving to go to Korea to get another CrossFit job. And so I kind of took his job. So I got a job coaching CrossFit when I was, I think, 24, 25, and in Asia. And that worked out well for me because I had just gotten into CrossFit, and I wanted to go to the CrossFit Games. That was like my sole purpose in life. I wanted to be as fit as I possibly could, because I'm a very competitive guy, and I wanted to go compete at the CrossFit Games and be as good as I possibly could be. And at that time in 2013, 2012, the region in Asia was much weaker than all of the regions here in the United States. So I had a better chance to qualify to go to the CrossFit Games. So then I just hung out in the Philippines for almost a year, training and coaching CrossFit, so I could go to the games. And then I almost qualified for the games my first year. I messed up one workout at the regional competition that really screwed my score up. So I ended up getting second place instead of first. And at that time, only the first place winner got to go to the games. So I missed out just barely my first year of trying to go to the games. And then one thing led to the next. There was a big fitness competition in Dubai. They were giving away a bunch of money. I flew from the Philippines, went and did that competition, did well. And then I got a job coaching CrossFit in Dubai because of that. So that's what got my foot in the door into Dubai. And then I just started training, coaching CrossFit. And then I've been in Dubai the past 12 years.
So from a training philosophy standpoint, you're going from a strength and conditioning D1 program into a CrossFit program, which we can talk about that. I'm not sure how you define the training philosophy. So
can't.
So two things are going on here. You're doing whatever you can because you just want to find a way that you can make a living working out.
Yeah.
And competing.
Yeah. I just wanted to live in the gym and not have a job where I had to wear a shirt.
Yeah. So the job really didn't matter.
No.
The training's what mattered.
Yes.
And then you're going to an entirely different training philosophy.
Absolutely.
Than everything that you've been doing since you were 9.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
But you don't know. Right, because you don't know the game.
I didn't really know or care. All I knew is that I could be good at CrossFit because basically, if you look at a lot of CrossFit athletes, they're kind of former athletes that couldn't make it at their original sport. You know, they weren't quite good enough to make it, you know, professionally at whichever sport they were brought up doing. So CrossFit's kind of like powerlifting. It's kind of like a sport for the rest of us, if that makes
well,
sense.
That's the interesting part to me because there's a base that's already been developed.
Absolutely.
Before they go into that.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's those people that don't have that base, you would know this better than I.
Yeah,
if the people don't have that base and then they jump straight into that without that base, I would assume that their top potential is compromised.
Absolutely. And like my transition into CrossFit was pretty seamless because I already went into the sport already squatting 400 or 500 pounds, cleaning over 300 pounds, benching, 300 pounds. So I was already strong.
So it's just learning the technique.
It was
and
just
the timing.
learning how to do basically the snatch, which is an Olympic lift, and then learning gymnastics, how to spend time on my hands, how to do those ring muscle ups, bar muscle ups, climbing a rope without my legs, all of the skills that are completely arbitrary movements that the founder of CrossFit, deemed important to be fit, and then to me, it was like, all right, well, I'm just going to get better at ring muscle ups, doing handstand push-ups, swinging around, on a bar.
Yeah.
And then to me, it always pretty simple. Like, all right, that's what I got to do. So I'm just going to practice that. And that's all I did. But when I first started CrossFit, it's just, and I don't mean this as a knock to anything, but really what it is just a bunch of random bullshit. If I'm being 100% honest, like constantly varying, what you're doing in the gym and never having any long-term plan or structure, that in essence is kind of CrossFit training.
Yeah.
Not by definition, but in reality and in practice, that's what it ends up being. So when I first got into CrossFit and I started following all these, benchmark workouts, I actually got weaker. I got worse. And I quickly figured that out. And once I did that, I was like, all right, this shit is not working. So then I actually just started going back to traditional strength and conditioning, training a lot like I did in college. And then I just threw in the CrossFit specificity into like my conditioning pieces, where you'd work on the skills of whatever handstand walking, rope climbs, muscle ups and all that kind of stuff. But basically I just kept squatting and deadlifting, getting as strong as I could. And so I don't know, I've always been pretty intuitive about training, and I know what works and I know what doesn't. I know what offers me the most value for my time. And so I basically got back into traditional strength conditioning, and that's the approach I took to compete in CrossFit.
Okay.
And even the most elite CrossFitters now, they don't do CrossFit. Like they basically do traditional strength conditioning, and then they do specific training for CrossFit where they'll throw in all of the random elements and they just combine those into workouts. And basically whoever just shows up to the competition and what you're tested on that day, that's going to be kind of whoever wins the competition. And that's one reason I really don't agree or don't really like the sport, because it's very, very subjective. And every time you go into a CrossFit competition, you're being tested on something different. And it's whichever competition you're going to, whoever's programming those workouts, it's basically, it's up to them. You don't really have control over what you're going to be tested on. And so that's why I consider it kind of a fringe sport. It's in my opinion, I'm not knocking the sport of CrossFit either. It's a much less legitimate sport in my opinion than, let's say, powerlifting or even high rocks or, any other sport that, when you show up to a powerlifting competition, you're going to squat, bench and deadlift.
Yeah, you know what you're training for.
Yeah. CrossFit, you don't know what you're training for. And that's like, partly what you're going to be tested on. You're going to be doing some kind of Olympic lifting. You're going to be tested on your overall work capacity, your fitness. You're going to be doing some kind of gymnastic elements, but you don't know what combination or what the workouts will be. And you're just basically showing up, and hopefully the training that you've been doing, which everyone trains differently, hopefully your training has prepared you enough to perform well in that competition.
And there was a couple elements that you said I want to kind of dig into a little bit. So when you were training for the CrossFit, events, there was a point to where your strength started to fall.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you felt the consequences of that.
Right.
How did you feel the consequences of that?
Well, so when I finished up playing college football, I'm squatting, around 500 pounds. And then when I got into doing CrossFit, and I started doing a lot less strength work and a lot more conditioning and just random arbitrary workouts, like my body changed. I lost muscle. Yeah, I might have been more aerobically fit, but strength is really the platform that everything else is built upon. Strength is the most important thing that you need to have, especially, I feel like, as an athlete, pretty much in any sport, and especially in CrossFit. Like, almost always the strongest athlete is going to be the best athlete, or one of them. I mean, in CrossFit, yes, you have to be very, very fit, but you can't be a good CrossFitter if you're weak. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. So, and I've always been in pretty good shape. I've always taken my, conditioning quite seriously. And I just realized, like, all right, if I want to clean and jerk 225 pounds 30 times, I got to be in shape and I got to be strong. Like, it doesn't matter how in shape you are. If you can't clean and jerk 225 over your head 30 times, it doesn't matter how fast you can run a mile.
Yeah, I get that. But how did it display itself for you in the workouts that you were doing,
right,
or the events you were doing?
Well, so when I immediately got into CrossFit, I was just all about it. I was reading the CrossFit Journal and, this new training methodology and all of this kind of stuff. And I was really kind of bought into it because I was also young, mm-hmm. not as knowledgeable as I am now. And I didn't really kind of see through, I don't want to call it a facade, but I didn't really see it for what it was. And I saw myself just getting weaker and, like I said, losing muscle, and I wasn't performing on some workouts as well as I probably would have in college, just because I wasn't doing the strength work.
Well, that's where I was kind of going with that, because in any sport, everything always depends. You can lose muscle,
right, and
actually lose strength, but still perform better, and that's where I was going. But when that performance begins to be chipped away, then that's where the crossroad hits,
right?
Because maybe your base level of strength was able to get to certain times,
and it was,
until it degrades,
right,
10%.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden those times are down, and then you can go in this spiral of frustration to where it's technique, it's everything but what you think it is,
right?
Not everybody, but most go through the cycle.
Right.
Like, they'll try to fix all these other things because they don't know the sport,
right,
or they don't know the training, or they think they're missing some magic element.
Right.
And then they'll arrive to this conclusion that maybe I just need to get the strength back. Maybe they max out on something and it's fucking way off.
Right.
And like, oh shit. Then they build that back up, then everything.
Mm-hmm. I was pretty, I don't know, fortunate, or maybe just a bit intuitive. And I just realized, like, man, if I want to be better at CrossFit, I just need to freaking keep squatting, mm-hmm. keep deadlifting, keep pressing, get better, at strict body weight strength. And so then I just started prioritizing that. And I just did a bunch of, like I said, traditional strength conditioning. And that's how I really, trained myself. And I always did my own program. I never followed any CrossFit programs. I never did that.
So was that about 2015 then?
Yes, sir. That was 2013, 2014, 2015.
Interesting times, right? So when you started doing those things and other people saw what you were doing, how was that received?
Well,
because it's different. It's different today.
It's much different. I mean, and I showed up and I competed. Most of my fitness career has all been done in Dubai. And that's why a lot of people in the United States don't even really know who I am. And I've had a successful fitness career in Dubai, and I've competed professionally a lot. And I say this with humility, but I've made more money competing than 99% of CrossFit Games athletes here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And when I just showed up to the competition, I was just a lot stronger than a lot of the other competitors, because they didn't have that upbringing of, they didn't start training when they were 9 years old. They didn't have the upbringing through high school. They didn't have the college strength and football conditioning background that I had, and then, in my opinion, CrossFit, it's just, dude, who can tolerate the most discomfort? Mm-hmm. Who can go through the workout and complete, the most reps, or complete the work as fast as you can? And when you're doing all these different workouts and there's heavy implements involved, barbells, sandbags, whatever it might be, being strong helps you with that. And my work capacity, because I was strong, just allowed me to have a higher level of work capacity than everyone that I was competing against that really didn't have the background that I had.
Are you looking to boost recovery enhance your sex drive and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? You know, things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a Table Talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over the counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being.
So I think it helped a lot.
How did you first phase this back into your training? Because you're still competing during this time period.
Right.
So did you phase it back in like in a block type of format, or did you?
I wasn't, honestly, I wasn't smart enough to really do that. You know,
so you were just, cause at that time, I think a lot of people were putting in like 5-3-1 at the end of their workouts.
Yeah, they would.
You know, and is that the route that you went with, something like that?
So I'm very familiar with Jim Wendler,
yeah.
You know, starting strength and all of that. And, you know, I think my very first strength program, when I was competing in CrossFit, I got from my buddy John, and he was following a juggernaut program, you know, because he was really into Olympic lifting. And so I just did some squat cycles right there, and pretty much I'd show up to the gym every week, and I would follow some kind of squat or deadlift program.
Now, was this at the back end of your already CrossFit training?
This was more the front end. It was probably a year or two after I got into CrossFit. I realized doing all these random ass workouts like on CrossFit main site or following these random CrossFit training blogs wasn't working, because it grossly undervalued consistent progressive strength work and grossly overvalued random conditioning.
Yeah.
I was like, this shit doesn't work.
Well, it's interesting because you put it first, because going back to that time, what a lot of the athletes were doing were taking like the juggernaut. They're taking some other existing program, and then truncating it down to just the strength movement, but then they would put it very last.
Yeah, I never did that.
You know, so you prioritized it first.
So what I would do, and still even how I train to this day, because I'm kind of getting a little bit back into CrossFit, not because I like it, but because I like competing.
Yeah.
And I'll do some kind of Olympic lifting at the very beginning of my workout for about 10 or 15 minutes to really prime my central nervous system to get into training. And then I'll do the main strength work, whether that's going to be some kind of squat, deadlift. It might be a bent over row. It might be a single leg squat. It might be a push press, overhead press. But I always prioritize strength first. Strength is the most important thing that I could tell anyone to do. And what most people in general, not just people that are in the CrossFit world, the single greatest thing that anyone can really do is get stronger. That's the fact. Like if you really think about what offers someone the most value for their time in the gym, it is getting stronger, just building and maintaining and preserving muscle. And so I always prioritize that. Like I'll very rarely ever do conditioning before my strength work. Only if I'm trying to, really focus on some kind of conditioning element, then will I maybe do the conditioning piece before the strength. But strength is number one. John Wellborn. So I'm a huge fan of him. I'm also, I really respect Mark Ripito as well, just because those guys, they saw through the bullshit of CrossFit, the facade of CrossFit, and they quickly recognized that strength is really the number one most important thing that you can have. And John Wellborn was in CrossFit. He did CrossFit football. He did all that. And he just saw through it. He got away from it because he realized what really offers people the most value for their time. And that's getting stronger. It's being strong. So I've always taken a strength first approach. to my training. And I, even after like 1 year, one or a half years of doing CrossFit, I was like, this shit's not actually how I'm going to get better at CrossFit, or it's not how I'm going to win competitions. It's getting as strong as I possibly can. And then just adding in the variety, you know, and the skill acquisition of the CrossFit movements. Like I said, that, you know, Greg Glassman deemed to be important, when in reality they're pretty arbitrary movements. You know, I mean, it kind of is.
Well, if you break it down, in a way, it's kind of like strongman, right?
In a way,
you know, there's a few base things that you're going to do no matter what the game,
same with
what
CrossFit.
the event is.
Yeah.
And then you have to train, you know, specifically for those during certain times.
Absolutely.
And then build a base.
Yes.
You know, the strength that goes through there. As you were trying to put this together, how long did it take for you to feel like you had the training locked in? Because you're trying to
I experienced success in CrossFit quite early, just because I had the background of strength conditioning. So I won the world's second biggest CrossFit competition 18 months after starting CrossFit. So, and I realized it pretty quick that I was like, no, I'm not going to be doing constantly varied functional movements at high intensity. That's not how I'm going to train. I'm going to get freaking strong as shit, be good at Olympic lifting, have the skill acquisition to do the gymnastics, and I'm going to train basically like an athlete again. Like I was playing college football, except instead of practicing football, I was just practicing random workouts. That's really how you do it, in my opinion. And if I was going to go back and train CrossFit today, that's exactly how I would do it.
How would you physically lay that out? Because there's a couple different ways I see people will do this. Is they just do it all. Yeah. Right. Then they're training 6 hours, 7 hours a day.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that.
Or they physically lay it out.
Right. I would honestly, so I would have higher training volumes, kind of probably 3 to 6 months leading up to the competition. So 6 months before a competition, if I know I was getting ready for it, I would probably do more strength work. And then, you know, maybe 3 months before, I would drop off a little bit of the strength work, but I would never stop doing strength work, and I would do more conditioning, because I knew, like, when you're doing a competition, a lot of it is just work capacity and fitness, but you still have to maintain that baseline level of strength. So I would do a bit less strength work, a bit more conditioning, and there'd be times where I'd be training 2 or 3 times a day, sessions a day, but I would never train, you know, like 4 or 6 hours at once. I would break that up. Like, or I would do, you know, Olympic lifting and strength work in the morning, and then I would come back in the afternoon and I would hit 1 or 2 conditioning pieces. And I would
say context is huge. Yeah. Right. So I was listening to you debate somebody else about absolute strength, and it was interesting, because the whole time I'm like, the context fucking matters.
It does.
Right. So if you come out and you're like, look, strength is the most important aspect, and it is, right? Because it raises everything. But if you're going to peak for something that's going to be endurance based, well, then it's going to have, you can't linearly build strength for 20 years, or we'd all be benching 8,000 pounds.
Absolutely.
Right. There's a phase, but it's interesting to me how that always gets left out. It's like,
in context, absolutely matters. Yeah. And I'm not saying doing cardio or doing conditioning is not important. I think it absolutely is.
Yes.
But it should never be at the expense of strength. And like, I would never, like, I've trained a lot of people. I've spent thousands of hours on the gym floor. I've taught thousands of CrossFit classes. I've done thousands of personal training sessions. And the single greatest thing that I could do for anyone is just to get them stronger. And then if they want to be fitter or have, you know, better work capacity or better cardiovascular, you know, respiratory function, give them some conditioning. But if you really want to help someone, get them stronger. Make their life easier standing up out of a chair, getting out of bed, walking upstairs. All right. That's the greatest thing that you can do for anyone. And if you just think about humans as a living organism, all right, do you know why people die? Do you know why people die?
The loss of muscle mass is what born there.
Precisely.
Strength,
sarcopenia. Right? They lose muscle mass as they age. And even after the age of 30 years old, all humans, we start losing muscle unless we actively fight to preserve that. How do you preserve muscle mass? You freaking strength train, you lift weights. All right. And that is what you need to do, is forever. All right. I mean, I've used this analogy before, but if you had a 90-year-old grandpa, do you think your 90-year-old grandpa gives a shit about PRing his 5K run or his, you know, whatever random CrossFit workout, or does he care about being able to stand up out of a chair and pick up his grandkids? You know, he cares about standing up out of a chair and picking up his grandkids, because that's what, and strength is what allows you to do that. And I'm not saying if you want to be an elite level CrossFitter, you got to squat 800 pounds, you know, or be a power lifter and not have any work capacity at all. However, you have to have the fundamental baseline level of strength just to live your life and interact with your environment, you know, and being strong allows you to do that. Being strong preserves your muscle mass. Your muscle is what allows you to move your body. You know, that's what allows you to stand up out of a chair, open a door, you know, walk upstairs. It's that fundamental in my opinion. And so I don't even think it's an opinion, that's a fact. You have to have some kind of baseline of strength. And that's what strength training does. It forces you to maintain your muscle as long as possible. And the longer you can maintain and preserve your muscle, the longer you're going to keep moving your body and the longer you're going to live. You know, I don't even understand how that's really debatable.
Well, I think where people will come at that is they're going to take that context and say, that's the only thing you have to do. That's it.
And I appreciate you saying that because you're absolutely right. Because they're gonna take me out of context. They're saying, oh, it's only about lifting weights, squat, bench, deadlift, strength training. I'm not saying that. And anyone that's ever followed me or knows what I'm about, I do a shitload of conditioning. I spend a bunch of time on an assault bike or a rower or conditioning, and I'll still to this day I'm in an elite level of fitness. All right, because I do believe conditioning is important. It's important for overall health and well-being. But I always strength train, always, because I understand that is what offers me the most value for my time. And the last thing that I'll do, even when I'm 70, 80, 90 years old, I'm going to be lifting weights because I understand that's what's actually going to provide me the most benefit for my overall health and muscle mass. It's like muscle is the organ of longevity. You may have heard that, but it's true. Muscle is the organ of longevity. The longer you can maintain and preserve your muscle, the longer you'll live.
Yeah, I can lean into my bias real hard there and say that the absolute strength, you know, is going to matter the most because it's going to degrade.
Absolutely.
You know, no matter what we want to do, father time always wins.
Absolutely.
Right. So the higher you can have it before it degrades, the higher you can have it at a healthy state. Right. Right. Because there's other variables. I mean, you can have too much muscle, you know.
I could go back and forth. I could go back and forth with you on this as well. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
I mean, if we're talking pro bodybuilders and shit like that, there's a reason they downsize. Right. But they don't downsize to nothing.
No.
You know what I'm saying? They downsize to where that healthy part would be, because there's a part where it can become unhealthy, but they're not competing for health.
Right.
You know, when they get to that level, if it's strongman, powerlifting, whatever it is, that health is not the reason why they're doing what they're doing.
Precisely. They're doing it to compete. And I'm a huge Stan Efferding fan. And I mean, he's gone on a rant. He made these Rhinos rants on YouTube probably 6-8 years ago. But I mean, he goes on to say, hey, if you want to be healthy, don't compete, you know, and he's absolutely right. I mean, but then it all gets into an argument about what's health. But, you know,
see, that's where the nuance comes in, right?
And context
matters. Health, you know, health for what? You know, if you're a pro bodybuilder, that what is health is going to be completely a different metric.
Right.
Than if you're just trying to have a higher quality of life.
Yes.
I don't like longevity because I don't know if we can actually make ourselves live longer, but we can have a higher quality.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you really want to live the longest or be the healthiest you can be, and this is where you can lean into your bias of absolute strength. And the way I look at it, and just, you know, my brand is called True Strength, because I've just come to the conclusion that for optimal health, you need to have a good balance of absolute strength, relative strength, and also mental strength. And so that's how I think about it. And I want to maintain my absolute strength as long as I possibly can. Like, I want to be strong with a barbell. However, I also want to have a good level of relative strength, meaning I can move my body weight. Because if you have a good level of relative strength, the only thing that really means is that you're not going to be a fat piece of shit. All right. Because you can't move your body weight. You know, if you're a strong man who's 400 pounds, that strong man, he's not going to be banging out 15, 20 pull-ups. He's not going to be doing a bunch of, you know, strict muscle ups or dips or anything like that. I mean, he's really good at what he does. He's really good at lifting heavy loads. However, if you look at a world-class strongman, let's say Thor Bjornsson, he just, you know, I think he tried to deadlift 501 kilos. he is incredibly strong, one of the strongest men in the world, and he's one of the best in the world at what he does. But you could also argue that guy might not be very healthy right now. And I guarantee you're going to see that guy probably drop, 50 to 100 pounds, over the next 6 months, because he was training to deadlift 500 kilos. And if you look at him, if you've watched his evolution over the past 2 or 3 years, he's literally gotten so freaking big, because that is what his sport and what his goals required. But that's not exactly healthy.
Well, yeah, I mean, the context with the absolute strength matters, right? Because it can be extracted, and say it's you or I that we want to have anybody, doesn't matter who it is, perform something really heavy for a single or a triple.
Right.
That's not going to happen if they got shitty form. To be able to actually display strength in that manner, they're going to be able to, they have to know how to brace. They're going to have to know how to stabilize the weight. They're going to need to know how to do all these other things, which you have to train them to progressively be able to do. When it gets extracted and put out there, the assumption is, no, these guys will take somebody who's never trained before and stick them under a 1 rep max barbell squat. And it's like, no, not really. If it is a 1 rep, it might be a tempo rep,
right? Really
fucking slow, to be able to build that up.
Yep.
So they're working towards the ability to actually display that,
right?
Which is what you would want. And because I'm sure you've heard it as well. If you train heavy, you're going to get hurt, all this other kind of shit. Yeah, true. If you're not prepared for it.
Absolutely. But that takes years, and a lot of training cycles and just a lot of time for adaptation to occur.
It's called periodization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's, you see how the context.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's kind of how YouTube works.
It is, but that's the beautiful thing about long form podcasts and conversations, because you can go into these nuances and actually explain that and not be misrepresented.
Yeah.
So.
Which it shouldn't even be fucking nuanced, though. I mean, because what trainer, you've known trainers, smart ones, dumb ones, and excellent ones across the board. What trainer in their right mind is ever going to stick somebody under a 1 rep max if the person's not prepared to actually display the strength for that? I know it was fucking zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
None of them that are worth a shit.
Yeah. I mean, common sense.
Absolutely.
Kind of shows that, right?
Yes.
But to be able to train, to be able to display that ability is a whole thing,
right.
Which checks off all these boxes.
Yes. It absolutely does. But again, I mean, I've thought about training a lot, because this is all I've ever done. I know a lot about very little, if that makes sense. And I've kind of discovered that training's almost cyclical, but one thing that's never changed, in my opinion, is just being strong and lifting weights. And like I said, nothing really offers you more value for time. And everyone's going to look at training differently. And so I think it's a very personal thing. And it's a very personal preference. But for me, it's always just about sticking with what works, always sticking with the basics, not really deviating, because again, I mean, if you just want to get stronger, then I feel like people have known how to do that for many, many years, I personally take a very simple approach to it. And I like lifting a barbell. I've discovered that's what really gives me the most value for my time. I mean, like if you get under a heavy bar and you bang out some heavy squats, I don't really feel like you're going to find a better way to give you more return on your training investment. That's just my opinion, and I've just put myself through it. And I don't speak, I'm very careful to speak in absolutes, and I'll tell you, I'm not the most well-researched or maybe the most qualified trainer or coach, but what I am is experienced. I've spent a lot of time in the gym lifting weights and putting myself through it. And I feel like that's more important than anything, just putting yourself through it. And before you tell anyone how to do something, you should probably have the experience and knowledge of putting yourself through it first, before you ever try to get anyone stronger, before you ever try to lecture anyone on how to get stronger or be healthier.
So through your coaching, when people are I'm going to assume people are coming into the gym that are all over the spectrum.
Sure.
As far as fitness.
Absolutely.
So how are you taking the people that come in that are radically unfit?
I'll tell you.
And start.
I literally, if someone's untrained, they're a novice, they've never trained it before, the first thing I'll have them do is sit down in a chair and stand up. And I just teach them the most fundamental movement pattern you possibly could. That's a squat. All right. I literally just tell them sit down in a chair and stand up. And then Most people can do that. And then I'll just give them a very basic front loaded goblet squat, hold a dumbbell or a kettlebell and start doing some kind of a weighted squat, a resisted squat. And I'll take them through that. And everyone's the individual's different. Every person's different, but I'll always start them off with just a basic body weight squat and then a loaded squat. And then I start having them pick up something off the ground. That's a deadlift. Then I make sure, can they do a strict push-up? If they fell on the ground, do they have the physical strength or ability to even get themselves up off the ground? The way I think about effective training, I don't even think about specific exercises. I think about foundational human movement patterns. And that's going to be a squat, a deadlift, some kind of overhead press, some kind of horizontal press. Do you have the ability to pull your body weight above a pull-up bar? If you can't do that, then focus on rows. But it's really, I think about really effective training is basically 7 or 8 foundational human movement patterns and strengthening those movement patterns forever until the day you die.
This episode is brought to you by Element, the only electrolyte drink mix I trust and use daily. Each stick gives you exactly what your body needs. 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, 60 milligrams magnesium, no sugar, no fillers, no BS. Right now, Element just dropped lemonade salt, a limited time flavor that is crisp, clean, and perfect for summer training. It's available while supplies last, and when they're gone, they're gone. This is how I personally use Element. First thing in the morning when I wake up, before caffeine, put a little bit in water, slam it down. When I'm training, I'll mix it in whatever drink that I have. If it's just water, it's water, but if it's anything else, I throw it in there as well. Here's the best part. You can try this totally risk-free. Don't like it, give it to a salty friend, and Element will give you your money back, no questions asked. Head over to www.drinkelement.com/table talk.
Mm-hmm. I can list those off if you want.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it. So I think it's like, it's a squat, it's a deadlift, it's like a bench press, an overhead press, a pull up or any kind of vertical pull, some kind of horizontal rowing variation. All right. I like a single leg variation, like a lunge or a step up or a split squat. I like dips, those are just foundational movement patterns that I feel very strongly that any healthy human being should be able to do. So my training, my coaching pretty much revolves around those movement patterns. And I don't care what iteration of the exercise you do, whether it's a belt squat, a leg press, a back squat, it could be a trap bar deadlift, a straight bar deadlift, it could be a dumbbell deadlift, a sandbag deadlift. It doesn't matter. As long as you're strengthening those foundational human movement patterns, you're going to be getting that person stronger and offering them value.
So if that's where your base is, and you're going to have regressions if they can't do a pull up, right?
Absolutely.
Then you're going to have progressions.
Absolutely.
Right. So again,
that's common sense to me.
Yeah.
But I learned that over many years of training people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, context matters. Not everyone sees that. Not everyone understands that either. And I think that's what really separates a lot of good trainers or experienced trainers from, less experienced trainers.
Well, yeah, because they're going to want to pigeonhole you and say, look, you're bringing them in and you're trying to get them to squat 135 from the jump.
Right.
And it's like,
No,
they're not prepared for that.
Right.
But that's the base. These are the metrics that you're going to track them on.
And that was a huge problem with CrossFit as well. Like, they would try to pigeonhole people, try to get them to do things that they had no business doing in the first place. There would be people coming into my CrossFit gym in Dubai, and I'm supposed to teach this person how to do an overhead squat when this person can't even do a proper air squat or back squat. Mm-hmm. And I got to teach them how to do this advanced variation of a squat with a barbell when they can barely even squat an empty barbell on their back.
Well, that's an interesting one there too, because you'll have two sides of that continuum as well. You'll have the one side that says they just need to learn it with the broomstick over and over and over and over and over. Then the other side that says, yeah, they still need to learn the technique, but they're not strong enough to even do it with a barbell from the jump.
Answer this question for me, please. Does a broomstick feel anything like a barbell?
No,
it doesn't, Mm-hmm. And like, I apologize because I have really strong opinions and convictions about this, but again, the single greatest thing you can do for anyone is just get them strong with just foundational movement patterns. And we discovered how to do that 50, 70 years ago. It's a freaking barbell back squat, a barbell deadlift, a bench press. That is really what allows people to get the strongest. The barbell, in my opinion, is probably the greatest invention ever. Maybe the wheel or pockets or the airplane could be better. But other than that, the barbell, it's the greatest thing ever. you know, because we figured out quite quickly, you know, if we just make this barbell and then we can progressively overload it with these metal circles, we can actually get really, really strong, you know. And dude, if you have a 300 or 400 pound back squat, you're not going to have any problems probably doing an overhead squat with 135 pounds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it all goes back to basics, and you got to go back to regressions. And if you can't do a barbell back squat, then start with a body weight squat, then start with a goblet squat. And then once they get, you know, at least a little bit stronger, then you can put a bar on their back. It's that basic to me. So
with you moving from brick and mortar trainer to onto the online space, which has been a few years.
Yes, sir.
What have you found? What did you find from the jump was the biggest frustration with that?
I think probably the time, the repetitions. I mean, I've spent many years in the gym training people, and I just consider myself maybe an ambitious person. You know, I wasn't content being an in-person trainer or coach my entire life. I've spent so many hours on the gym floor. I've trained 8 to 10 people in a single day, coached CrossFit classes, trained myself. And I just realized quickly that lifestyle, you know, I'd reached a ceiling on that. And then I realized, all right, well, where do I go from here? And how am I going to make a bigger impact? Because what I realized when I was 28, 29, that I was only having a positive impact on the people that were coming inside of my gym, inside the 4 walls of those gym. And then social media was kind of evolving as well. Like, you know, YouTube, Instagram was starting to pick up, you know, a lot more popularity. And with the power of the internet, you can reach so many more people all over the world. And then I realized that, like, all right, if I want to be taken seriously and I want to actually have a positive impact on people, I need to start putting out a lot of content on social media. And so I just started in basically 2019, and I've just been pretty much grinding hard for the past 6 years straight, putting out as much content as I possibly could, you know, on Instagram, because that was my main form of social media that I consumed at the time. And so social media to me was just Instagram. But then I also realized, like, YouTube is really probably the best. YouTube, in my opinion, is the greatest social media platform where you can have the biggest overall impact and help the most people and educate the people the best, because it's long form content. And so then I realized that I just wasn't going to be content just being an in-person trainer. You know, I wanted to actually reach and help and positively impact as many people as I possibly could. So then I just started taking social media seriously.
Well, the unspoken part of that whole journey would be, there's, you know, a lot of trainers and coaches run into this, the better ones, because they have a full schedule.
Right.
So your personal time is reduced. There's not a whole lot of it. Then if you're thinking about having kids, it's like, well, when the fuck am I going to see them? You know, these questions come in. But then you're also kind of capped on how much you can make.
Right.
You can increase rates to a certain point, but then you're going to hit this crossroad.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple of different paths. You can try to, you know, supplement it online, move online, or you can open your own facility.
Right.
And have trainers underneath you. So why did you choose the online instead of that other path?
Right. Well, the reason I did that is because I was based in Dubai, and I'm American, and I'm coming back to America soon. And I just didn't want to, I was going to pretty much invest my entire life savings into, you know, a facility or gym in Dubai. And then I would basically be tied to that one single location, and my life would have been revolved around running a brick and mortar business. And I was very thankful that I had enough foresight to pump the brakes on that, and then just started focusing more on content creation and social media, because I realized there wasn't near the upfront investment. Building an online business, you know, requires much less money and just probably a lot less effort, you know, overall. And it has a lot more upside because your expenses are so much lower. And I love training. I love being in the gym. I don't love running a gym, if that makes sense. Dude, I don't care about washing people's towels or installing air conditioners or, you know, cleaning the gym floor every day. That's not what I love about training. And so I kind of had that realization, and I hired mentors. You know, a guy that he's a successful gym owner in Dubai, is probably the only one. he worked with me and told me, all right, hey, this is what you're going to be getting into. These are all the things you got to look into. You got to pay, you know, a year of rent up front, and you got to be able to pay all the money to outfit all the equipment and everything like that. Then you got to hire staff, cleaning crew, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And it was quite overwhelming to me because I was just probably 29 or 30, and I was going to be spending my entire life savings, you know, opening up a physical brick and mortar location. And then I thought to myself, you know what, do I actually have to do that? Because I was consuming a lot of YouTube at the time as well. And I was like, I looked at other, you know, prominent YouTubers, and I was like, are these guys, do they have their own gym? And not all of them did. A lot of them just focused on, you know, content creation, making videos. And YouTube gives you a lot of, I guess, credibility, and it, you know, it gives you a pretty solid reputation if you put out, you know, legitimate content. And so then I just started focusing on that. And so what I did is I had, I think 4,000 or 5,000 followers on Instagram. That's it. I hired a full-time videographer, you know, when I didn't even have a following. I didn't even have a YouTube channel, and I just hired a full-time videographer. He still works with me to this day, and that's how I make all my content. And I remember walking into the gym that I was training at, you know, there's a bunch of other coaches and trainers in there. I walked in there with a videographer, and all these coaches are looking at me like, who the fuck does Tanner think he is? What's he doing? And I was a bit self-conscious at first, but then I knew deep down inside I just couldn't give a fuck, and I just made content. And then I started thinking about, all right, how can people take me seriously? I was a big T-Nation reader. I started writing articles for T-Nation. You know, I submitted that, and I wrote many articles for T-Nation. I did a lot of training videos for T-Nation. That was what kind of got my start, kind of got my name out there. And then I realized, all right, do I just want to be a T-Nation writer, or, you know, writing articles? And I thought, no, because all the guys that I looked up to that I really liked, they were all on YouTube. And I was like, dude, I consume so much YouTube. If I really want to help people, then I should probably start putting out more content on YouTube. So then I just started building a YouTube channel. And that's really has been kind of my evolution. And that,
well, it's interesting, right? Because you're looking at the gym thing, and you don't want to, you know, clean the toilets and, you know, manage the finance. Oh, there's a lot that goes into it.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking that.
No.
I just knew what I liked and what I didn't like.
But when you go online, there's also a whole lot that you didn't know.
Oh, there's hard. It's
when you jumped in, would just kind of equivalent to the cleaning the toilets.
Yeah.
You know, and all the other stuff that goes on there, because there's always more than what people think it is.
Absolutely.
To where, in a way, I would say from a time commitment, there's probably more time commitment on that end than on the brick and mortar, because at least when the gym's closed, you're kind of done.
Yeah, the gym's closed.
You know, you're never done when you're online.
And that's true. And, you know, I'm a kind of a one-man show. I'm not, I mean, I have some people that help me, but I never stop working. I work, you know, 7 days a week, because if I don't work, man, I'm not going to be able to keep a roof over my head. And so I spend a lot of time on a computer, interacting, coaching clients, you know, making content, writing YouTube scripts, thinking about what my next YouTube video is going to be. And you're right. There's no shortcuts, I feel like, in this game, and you have to work extremely hard for an extremely long time if you want to make it.
Well, you also find that, because this I find a lot with this strength coaches that are trying to navigate different spaces, is, you know, they have that motto of, you know, work hard, adversity, all the shit that we learn in the gym.
Yep.
And then when it comes to the things they may have to do for their business, which business people would see as that grind, that work hard, they don't want to do that. Right. This isn't what I saw. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it's not lifting weights. Yeah. It's not doing something they really enjoy. But
well, the inverse is that is your client, who is the business person.
Yeah.
That's how they see the training.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But then
that's a great analogy.
You see what I'm saying? They'll embrace it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a different kind of suck.
It is.
Then, because you're not breathing hard and all this other crap that you're used to, that, you know, the train harder and do hard things every day, that I see that from a couple different perspectives. The one is, I get it, but you're conveniently choosing the thing that you like to train hard at.
Right.
Not the thing that's actually going to help you
or grow your business
where you want to be.
And you could not be more right. And I mean, you're further on down the road and you're a much more successful businessman than I am, but you've been doing it a lot longer, but you've actually, and I've read your stuff a lot. And, you know, I think you've gone through phases yourself where you were all in on training, and then you've gone all in on your business as well, you know, and I'm kind of at that crossroads. I love training, but there's times where I'm on my computer 8 to 10 hours a day. And I'm lucky if I squeeze in an hour training session in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing with that, and the key takeaway that I would like all you guys to understand, is when you are in that mode of that process and you're still working with clients, you are your client now. Right. So when they do say things like, man, I don't know if I have the time to train, you get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have this, and you'll do it because it's a set behavior that's so ingrained since you were 9 years old, and all this other stuff, and you'll figure it out. Sometimes you might not even be able to figure it out, but most of the time you're going to be able to figure it out.
Right.
They don't have any of that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So a lot of coaches in their infancy or as they're coming out, like, that fucking guy's got no fucking mental fortitude. They're weak, da 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 da. And it's like, well, if they have that opportunity to flip that script, then I think their ability to communicate with that client will pivot.
Yes.
It will change
Yes.
because now you understand,
right,
where they're coming from.
And I do. And
yeah.
I've become a much better coach, especially the older I've gotten and the more I've focused on business, and my life doesn't solely revolve around training anymore. I mean, I love training, and I'll always...
It does, but in a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get it. And I understand people's lives, they're not like mine. Like, that their life doesn't revolve around the gym. They don't spend all day in the gym. They have a job, they have kids, they have a career, they have other things in life that, take away from their time training. But at the end of the day, and this is truth, everyone will make time for what's important to them. That's it.
Well, on the other side, the reason why you force it, or any of us will force it, is because if you let that go, your productivity across all other spectrums will drop.
Absolutely.
So it has to stay in there. And the thing with business that's a lot like training is probably 90% of what we do in the weight room probably doesn't yield the results we think it does.
Probably not.
Most of it's just a failure mess.
Right.
And that's the same in business, but it's more exposed.
Yes.
Because you see the metrics more closely.
Yes.
And you're going to fail way more.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
I can attest to that because I've gone through different phases of my business. I've tried different things, and thankfully I'm kind of honing in on what really works. And I was very resistant to it, for a long time, but I just got tired of, beating my head against the wall and like thinking, all right, why is my business not growing? Maybe this approach isn't the right approach. And there's been other guys that I've looked up to, and I've seen kind of their approach, and I tried to emulate them, but that didn't work for me personally. And one thing I've also learned about business is there's many different ways to skin a cat, and what worked for one person may not work for another person.
Well, here's the interesting thing with that is we'll criticize those people that we will call program hop.
Right.
The 531 juggernaut. They're not working on creating, a base philosophy that they're going to work from and then figuring out how to pull and extract in from that. Same thing will happen in business.
Yes.
Right. People, instead of building their base philosophy, will see, this mentor, and then boom, do everything that mentor says. And this isn't working. And then boom, jump and do everything that mentor says. Right. And it's the same thing.
They probably won't stick with any one thing long enough to actually see it through and to make it work.
Yes. And it's exactly the same thing, to where everything that you learn in training also applies, but you have to remember.
Yes.
It's hard to connect the dots sometimes. It's actually, you won't connect the dots until you can look back and see.
And I've kind of connected those dots a little bit, like just to kind of use a simple analogy. So as I mentioned earlier, I don't deviate from barbell training because I just realized that's what really, nothing's better. I don't think there's anything better than doing squats, deadlifts, bench presses, pull-ups, and that same carryover is kind of applied to business for me. What's really grown my business is just focusing on just helping maybe less people, but going deep with those people, and really, really helping them, rather than just trying to build the biggest social media following and try to sell as many shitty $20 programs as I can in a month, if that makes sense. My business has really changed and evolved where I focus on helping less people, but really actually truly helping them, and coaching them. And content creation's become a big part of that as well. I'm sure it has for you. Because dude, you're a very legitimate and reputable person in this industry. And that's because I think you've probably realized what offers you the most value for your time, for your business. It's building a brand. I'm in your bathroom and you have your freaking own branded toilet paper rolls. I noticed that. because
it was kind of like a pandemic thing, but
but either way, look where we are. Elite FTS everywhere. You've created a very, very strong brand. You're doing podcasts. You started off writing articles. You've done it. You understand what kind of helps you and grow your business. And so me, the same thing. Like, I know that my coaching business is probably what's going to help me, grow the most professionally, but obviously creating a strong brand and putting out legitimate, genuine fitness content has helped me a lot as well, because it offers you a level of legitimacy and you can build a strong reputation. And again, I'm just maybe a bit old school, but I believe in nothing but hard work, consistency, and discipline.
Yeah. I mean, the brand matters, because this is what is this, S5? This is the 5th gym, and it's not a public gym, but it's the 5th gym. I don't want to say it's a studio either, because people fucking train hard. And it's the 5th gym that we've had. And after the first one, which was just basically set up so I could do my accessory work when I was powerlifting, and I used to drive into Columbus. After that first one, each one that we go into, I would purposely lay on the floor, sit on a bench. I would go anywhere I could in the gym and then just look. Like, if somebody had a camera and took a picture, would they know where this is? Right. And if it was a blind spot, they didn't have something. I'm not saying the logos were all over the place, but if it wasn't something that said, hey, that's Elite FTS, then I would change it.
Yeah, they're smart.
To where it would always be seen. Dave Tate here from Elite FTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu.
I took just an Instagram story today of me squatting, and the first thing I noticed is I'm squatting right below an Elite FTS sign on your rack. And I strategically knew that you thought of that. Yeah. Because you're a smart man, you're business savvy, and you understand the power of brands. So much respect to you. Yeah.
Well, the interest, when you're building a personal brand, this would be a question like, why did you go with True Strength? When you're building a personal brand, it's different, right? Some people want to go with their name, right? Because it is their personal brand. I decided not to do that because it's a company, right? And there's more people associated with that. But then when I made that decision to do that, granted, retail is what supports the content. Yes. Right. So I'm kind of like the InfoWars of the strength and conditioning field, like the Alex Jones, right? Yes. So where all the content that he'll put out, as whacked as it is supported by products that he sells. Right. If the products don't sell, then there's no content. Right. That's essentially Elite FTS in a nutshell. That's what allows the content to be put out complimentary for 27 years. Incredible. That's what keeps it. So if sales drop, then there's probably no content because there's no business. But we're not monetizing the content. Now, on the flip side of that, so I had to be careful with where to segue back to where I was. I had to be careful of where my name would be and where the company would be. Right. And that's been a balance that's had to been played for 27 years. If it gets too big, then I got to bring in sponsors, other people to do content to kind of bring that balance out. Now, when it's a personal brand, it's different. Right. Because then the name has to be predominant. Yes. And then the name of the company would be secondary. Yes. So why did you go with True Strength?
So I went with True Strength, kind of 2 reasons, and I've taken a different approach to you. So like, I don't sell, or manufacture gym equipment or anything like that. It's more of a personal brand, and it's just something that I came up with in between doing personal training sessions, because when I was sitting on my computer writing workouts, and I knew like I was destined for more, and I wanted to be something greater than just, I wasn't content being a trainer, only a trainer. And I thought to myself, man, I love being strong. And I feel like there was just different aspects of being strong. Like I said, I want to be strong. I want to have absolute strength. I want to have relative strength. And I consider myself a very strong person mentally. And so that kind of true strength encapsulated that. And it just kind of so happened to also be my initials. So I have more of a personal brand than, maybe Elite FTS, True Strength TS, Tanner Shuck. That's kind of where it came from. And I'm not sure I think everyone does associate True Strength with Tanner Shuck, but my name, my brand, my YouTube channel is Tanner Shuck. It's probably more of a personal brand, but I've just kind of taken maybe a less, I don't know, I wouldn't call it more direct, but I've just focused more on social media and content creation rather than actually, manufacturing gym equipment and retail and selling like that. Like I don't sell any products per se. The way I make a living is basically through coaching, and and the content creation has definitely helped that. But just putting out a real, honest, genuine message.
What I can say with that is the grass is always greener, right? Because a lot of people that are doing what you're doing will look and say, man, I wish I was selling, the retail type of stuff, until they see the margins. Yeah. It's like, well, a net margin of 2%, it's really good. And they're operating at higher margins, where the people that are doing what I'm doing will look at that and say, man, it must be fucking awesome to be able to have, those high margins, but yet there's not as much top end revenue, right? With the whole thing. Yes. So it's a mind fuck, and it's a comparison game, right, that none of us really should play. The question I want to ask, though, is because a lot of coaches will be watching this, and there's online coaches and there's for real coaches. And I'm not saying the online coaches are bad, but there's the for real coaches, right? People that have been in the gym 10 hours a day, years on years on years on years. And those are the ones that should be creating more content. Yes, sir. Right. But it's such a foreign space, right? So when you jumped over to that, and they're all operating in the same mind space that you were when you're full for 3 years. Right. It's, I don't want to say they're stuck, because some people they're cool with all that. That's all they ever want. That's fine. And that is fair. But there's other ones that want to make that jump over to it, but get super frustrated because they'll see a lot of the people that have the biggest influence don't have the on the floor experience. They don't have the experience, or even the presence, or even the numbers, or the physique. Yeah. I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah. So how did you deal with that obstacle? Yeah. Because what they do have is the knowledge on how to build that online brand. Absolutely. And this is a big part of YouTube creators and content creators. And I look at a lot of these guys, I'm like, do these motherfuckers even train? Like, do they really even know? Like, they're excellent content creators. They can make it an incredible, engaging YouTube video that'll get a lot of watch time, and they'll have a great intro or hook to their video. They'll have great re-engagement points to their video. They say everything perfectly. It's all scripted and all done like that. But I was like, does this motherfucker even squat 300 pounds? And that's where there's a distinction between a content creator and then someone that actually is a legitimate coach and trainer. And I kind of wanted to bridge that gap. And the way I did it is I took a big risk on myself. Like I stopped training clients so I'd have time to put out fitness content. I made less money. I willingly made less money just so I could have more time in the day to just put out more fitness content, because I saw there was more potential, and a lot more room to scale, creating an online business versus just trading all my time for in-person training. That was a hard thing to do. It's scary too. Well, how did you get out of your own way? Because that's where I see a lot of the coaches that have that problem is they get super frustrated because the first video gets 30 views. Yeah, for sure. Consistency. Dude, if I go back and look at my first YouTube videos, they were shit, and then if I look back at creating my first, Instagram posts or my first Instagram reels, they were shit. You don't get good at creating content just by making 1 or 2 videos. Like if you look, I've made probably hundreds of YouTube videos. I've posted on Instagram thousands of times. It's just repetition. Like, dude, I wasn't squatting 500 pounds the first time I walked into a gym either, And so it's like, you basically just decide, all right, what do you hate more? This is how I think. And I'm not saying this is the right way to think, but like, what do I hate more? Do I hate my life
living in a gym, spending in a gym all day on a gym floor, trading all my time for money? Or do I hate the process of content creation and building a following? And I decided that I hated staying in the same spot, staying stuck. And I knew the only way I was going to grow is if I got out of my comfort zone. I spent less time on the gym or less time on the floor training people and just focusing on building my brand and making more content. I just had that realization, and it wasn't easy. It's not easy. And I still struggle with it, so it's not easy, but I feel like anything worthwhile is never easy. Building this facility you have here, this is, what'd you say, this is your fifth gym, fifth facility? You've been doing this for 27, 30 years. Was that easy?
Hell no. It's harder now than it's ever been.
Yeah, I'm sure. But you made a decision. All right, what do you actually want? I consider you a very successful, ambitious man, and like you've decided to take the hard path, and you didn't do what's easy. And if you want to be successful, stop doing what's easy. Do what's hard. Do what's hard today, and your life will be easier tomorrow. That's my mindset. That's my approach, and that's the way I've thought probably the past 10 years.
I don't know if I would say it will be easier tomorrow. I'll say your ability to tolerate the harder becomes better.
maybe your threshold.
Yeah, the threshold changes.
It changes.
Yeah, the threshold. It has to change.
Yes.
Right, because it doesn't, then you're dead.
But at the end of the day, it's like.
But that's strength training too.
Absolutely, you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Because if you can't adapt,
right,
to the weight that's on the bar, then you're not going to be able to get stronger.
Precisely. There's really nothing easy about it. And I mean, I wouldn't consider myself, incredibly successful, online content creator or fitness trainer. But I mean, I'm proud of everything I've done, and I'm looking forward to continuing to grow and evolve. But I know the only way I'm going to do that is by doing what's hard every day and embracing the suck. I'm going to have to continue to do that. That's the only way. So I think success is a mindset. And again, for me, this is just what's resonated with me. It's like, dude, what do I hate more? Do I hate being stuck and staying in the same place in my life, or do I hate actually getting out of my comfort zone and growing? That is how I think. Like I drove across the country to do this podcast. It's the biggest podcast I've ever been on. I'm truly honored to be sitting across the table from you right now. And it's not easy driving 14 hours in a car to be here, but I don't care. Cause like I know this is in line with my goals and the future that I want to manifest for myself. So.
Well, when I hear, what do I hate more? I'm kind of split on that, because if it's in training and you want to advance, a lot of the times what you have to do to advance is the shit that you actually hate to do. And in business it's the same way.
It's the same way.
There's a whole lot of stuff. So it's where you have this big long list of shit. We're going to default go to the stuff that we like to do.
Yes.
But the most important stuff is probably at the bottom.
Absolutely.
Which is what you hate.
I think of like whatever Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. Yeah. Like 20% of you do is what's going to yield 80% of the results. And that 20%, that's the shit that's going to suck. And that's how I think about training and business. Like, dude, no one wants to fucking get under a heavy ass bar and do heavy deep back squats. No one wants to do heavy ass deadlifts or heavy rows. That shit's hard. People don't want to do that. If you walk into most gyms, you're not going to see many people doing that because it's hard. They don't want to do it. They don't want to get out of their comfort zone. The world of business, in my opinion, is the same. And I literally had to grow up and be a lot more mature. And some of my business mentors helped me realize that. Like they just said, dude, you're not taking your business seriously. And that was a rude awakening for me, but I realized they were right, because I was like, these dudes were making way more money than I was. And I was like, why are they making more money? It's because they were doing the things that I was avoiding. And then I literally just had a hard conversation with myself. I was like, man, I got to quit being a pussy and just fucking do it. And I'm really happy I did.
Were there any topics you wanted to talk about I didn't bring up?
Honestly, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I think you can talk about nutrition, training, just mindset. I just believe in being very, very disciplined and consistent. And I feel like that's really the message that I've tried to put out to people, and just, there's no shortcuts. But really, I'm very content just sitting across the table and having this conversation. So if there's anything you want to ask me, we could speak about whatever. But I mean, in general, I feel like training could be quite simple. I think nutrition is quite simple. Happy to talk about anything you want, man, to be honest.
All right. So with the nutrition side, with clients, I'll make it even more difficult with the online clients.
Yeah.
Right. Because now you're not seeing them face to face. Right.
Right.
Which that had to be a change too.
Yeah.
Right. Because as soon as somebody walks in the door, you kind of know what mood they're in.
Absolutely.
Just from their body,
yes,
language.
Right.
And that's removed. So with the nutrition part, you got a very simple, I don't want to say cutthroat, but very simple philosophy with that. Which is it could very hard for people to comply.
And it's very opinionated, and it could be even perceived as judgmental. And I get that. And I don't try to be for everybody. And because I know I'm not, but I feel like the people that really do resonate with my message, they really resonate with it. And in regards to nutrition, I think it's very simple. Like, I kind of have a very binary perspective of food,
Okay. So to back up, you're not having the people come to you that you're going to have to convince of a lot of these things, because your marketing and branding's kind of already weeded that out.
Right. And like the people that apply for coaching with me, or they come to me, like, they've seen my content.
So they're ready. They're ready.
They've kind of accepted the truth and the reality, and they know that if they actually want to get the results that they seek, that they're going to have to change and have to take a different approach to what they've been doing, because what they've been doing hasn't been working for them.
Well, there's the context.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying? So
Yes,
if people see your content and they see your pieces out there, there's two things going on. One is you're speaking what you feel is your truth.
Yep.
The second is you're filtering out the people that you don't want to be your clients.
And purposely, I make controversial, polarizing content for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there'll be a reason where I start a video off with a very polarizing statement that people may love or may hate, because that's what gets views. And I mean, as much as I don't necessarily like that, but those are the games of social media that you have to play.
Well, two things are at play there, though. It's also filtering the potential client base that you're going to have.
Absolutely. Right. And I know for a fact, I mean, I'm not for everyone. I'm not going to try to help everyone, but I am going to help people that want to live in reality and that want to accept the truth, and that are really ready to make a change and embrace, the truth. So again, I mean, you could take that in a few different directions, whether it was training or nutrition or just overall mindset.
Yeah. So if it's nutrition, then what are the pillars there? Because you've already expressed this.
It's funny you said that, because literally every client I work with, and I put this message out on social media all the time, nutrition is incredibly simple, in my opinion. And I tell people to follow just 3 fundamental nutrition principles. And I'm fully aware, for context, these are blanket statements. These are generalizations. However, if you follow these 3 nutrition fundamentals, you will never fail, ever. And the principle number 1 is, if the food did not exist 200 years ago, do not eat it. Okay. In other words, like, if your grandparents, parents didn't have access to the food or did not eat that food in their lifetime, you should not eat that either. In other words, you probably don't want to be drinking fucking Coca-Cola or eating McDonald's. Okay? That shit didn't exist 200 years ago. Humans didn't evolve eating that. And then principle number 2, it's actually the same thing as principle number 1. I'm going to say the same thing in a different way. And that is, if the food did not directly come from an animal or was not directly grown from the ground, don't eat it. In other words, prioritize high quality animal-based foods, fruits, vegetables, rice, potatoes, breads, foods that humans evolved eating. Okay. And the biggest problem with that, especially here in the United States, is we've been conditioned and brainwashed to think it's fucking normal to eat Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A. We're inundated with advertising, marketing, commercials, with, hey, come eat this food. It's everywhere. When you drive across the highway, there's food advertisements everywhere. It's like literally ingrained into our subconscious minds, to think it's normal to eat low quality processed shit food. All right. And I apologize if I'm coming off as very opinionated or judgmental, but this is just the truth. All right. That's not normal. It's not normal to be fat and sick. If I'm 100 years ago, humans didn't even know what the term obesity meant. There was not an obesity epidemic in the United States. No one even knew that. That really just came to be with the advent of low quality processed foods. All right. I don't mean to, I'll just get to it. And principle number 3, every time you eat, prioritize protein. Okay. So every time you sit down for a meal, ask yourself, where is the protein in this meal? And I guarantee if you follow those 3 nutrition principles, you'll never fail.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
You'll always be fit, healthy, you'll probably have a high amount of muscle and a pretty low amount of body fat. And I also tell people, because people push back on that, oh, that's way too restrictive. I'm like, dude, you're not restricting yourself by eating that way. You're actually respecting yourself, you know? And that is my mindset. That's how I think about it. And it's not for everyone. And again, I'll reiterate that. I don't try to be for everyone. The way I think is like most of the decisions that I make for myself are based on whether or not my future self will thank me for it. But if you just follow those nutrition principles, you'll never fail. And I also think about it from a very fundamental standpoint, because like you'd probably agree to this statement, like you and I, we're human beings, right?
Last I checked, yeah.
Yeah, last I checked, me too. Okay.
Unless we're in a simulation.
Yeah, right. But at the end of the day, man, humans, we're animals. We're like any other animal or any other mammal on this earth, and our bodies work very, very similar, you know, biologically and physiologically. However, humans are the only animals on this earth that suffer from obesity, diabetes, cancer, dementia, all of these metabolic dysfunctions that are a result of a low quality processed food diet and being too sedentary. Like, dude, if you go to Africa tomorrow, you're never going to find any wild animals out in nature. You're never going to find any obese gorillas or any fat lions, because every other animal on this earth intuitively understands what and how much to eat. Every other animal on this earth eats a species appropriate diet. And it's really that simple. So if you want to get healthy, start eating like a human being again. And then that just goes back to those 3 nutrition fundamentals. All right. Don't eat foods if it didn't exist 200 years ago. Don't eat foods unless it directly came from an animal or was directly grown from the ground. And then every time you eat, prioritize protein. It's like, I've thought about this so much, and I've just tried to distill this down into the simplest message for people to understand. And that's what I've, you know, come down to. It's not hard. You just have to embrace it. And when you think about it like that, and you actually start thinking about, you know, I think self-love and self-respect is another big part of my message and my mindset. And when you think about eating and training, a healthy lifestyle, really what it comes down to is self-love and self-respect. Because someone that loves themselves, they respect themselves. Someone that respects themselves takes care of themselves. All right. And if you really just want to like boil it all down, I feel like that's kind of my overall, you know, message.
So if you have the mindset, the nutrition, and then the training, which one comes first? Like a chicken and egg scenario.
You know, you might think about this. People would probably want to say the mindset, but actually the truth is the training, in my opinion, because I was on a podcast the other day, and like I was asked a really good question, like for someone that's completely of the opposite mindset to me, because I fully understand I kind of lie on, you know, one of the extreme end of the spectrum, you know, and I don't expect everyone to meet me out here. The single greatest thing, if you're somewhere more on the middle of the spectrum, or you have much less opinionated, judgmental views than I do, which I fully respect and understand that, the single greatest thing you can do just to start to get to becoming healthier, or to becoming, you know, having a higher self-esteem, you know, more confidence, start lifting weights. Just freaking go into a gym and start getting stronger. And I feel like that will kind of have a snowball effect on your life. Like, I'm sure you're very similar to me. The barbell strength training changed your life. Your life's revolved around strength training, you know, and it's changed your life, and it's had an overwhelmingly positive impact on your life and many others probably listening to this podcast. So for anyone that's maybe a bit pissed off or doesn't like what I say or how I say it, that's okay. Just if you want to do one thing to make yourself better today, dude, start going to a gym, start lifting weights, just start doing something to make yourself better, and start making more decisions based on whether or not your future self will thank you for it. That's how I think.
Most of the people listening are going to already be lifting weights. So then the question becomes, it needs to be distilled. It will be the people that are around them that ask them about training. Right. Because we've all had that, and we've been around this our whole life.
Yes.
You know, and so what should they tell those people around them that ask them? Because that would just be straight gen pop. Right. What should they tell them?
Because that's the reality
that
they're going to be in. They're going to be at a dinner or a function or something like that.
And again, I would say, and this is why my message, it may not be for everyone, but I just think to myself, like, it's so easy to be average. Mediocrity is everywhere. It's literally ubiquitous around us. And like,
that's the actual definition of average, is average.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, man, especially when I come back to the United States, I'm very observant of everything I see and, you know, what's going on around the world. And I look at most people, and I'm not mean this to sound bad or disrespectful to anyone, but I'm just like, man, most people, they're not very healthy. Mm-hmm. You know, most people they eat completely mindlessly. They don't even exercise. And most people know they should. All right. Everyone knows that you should probably eat healthy food. Everyone knows that you should go into the gym or at least do some form of exercise. And so I would say the people that are open to it. So everyone listening to this podcast, you're probably a coach or a trainer, you're into your health and fitness. And if you want to have a positive impact on other people around you, you know, your circle, first off, lead by example, practice what you preach. And then just for the people that are open to it and receptive to it, man, give them a compliment, you know, tell them, hey, dude, go into the gym today, do something to make yourself better today. You know, but I really feel like it all starts with, you know, yourself leading by example, practicing what you preach. That's what I would tell people.
So what do you see the differences then between the culture in Dubai and then here?
Dubai it's a unique place, you know, and to be perfectly honest, like I'm at a point in Dubai, which is why I know I'm ready to come back to America, because I've built a gym in my house. I work out alone mainly because I'm very particular about who I surround myself with and who I give my energy to. I'd say the biggest difference is that, you know, there's obviously a culture difference because there's a lot of people. Dubai is a very transient and diverse place, but there's still a lot of unhealthy people there, you know? So I don't think there's like a huge difference. People live on low quality processed foods. People eat mindlessly all the time. They don't think about really exercising. It's not like, you know, their priority. But for me, I just think health, if you don't have your health, you have nothing, you know? And I think nothing should really come at the expense of your health. So again, I think Dubai is good, but I know I'm ready to come back to the United States because I feel like I can have a better impact here, especially being around more people that are like-minded. And I'm a proud American, and like I'm just ready to come home for it. But Dubai, the good thing about Dubai has been good for my fitness career because it allowed me to have a pretty, you know, successful career in like competitive fitness. I don't even want to call it CrossFit because it's just, all it is just working out, you know, fast. And it allowed me to build, you know, a brand and a following on social media. And Dubai also has a very strong fitness industry there. So it's been good for that. But I would say, in general, people are people kind of wherever you are in the world. And I just want to, wherever I am, I just want to put out a positive, helpful, impactful message just to let people get healthier and really become the best version of themselves and, you know, realize their full potential.
So you see the same health epidemic going on there that's happening here, except we may be further down the line.
Yeah. I mean,
in a bad way.
Yeah. In a bad way. Yeah. Well, again, low quality processed foods here, they're just ubiquitous, like I said. And it's just it's so normal to not eat real foods or to just eat out of convenience. And I feel like that's everywhere here. And I think, again, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I feel like, you know, a big part of that is just major food corporations, pharmaceutical industries, the healthcare industry. I feel like it's kind of a vicious cycle that people work through. And I've said this on numerous YouTube videos, but it's almost like the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry, like they need people to be fat and sick here because a fat and sick person's a paying customer. Like if you actually take control of your health, dude, you don't have to worry about, you know, being in the healthcare industry. You don't have to worry about taking prescription medications or, you know, statins or blood pressure, anything like that. You can like literally, you can take control of your health at any time just by the way you think. And that's hard to do here because of just, I don't know if it's corporate greed or just the way that government has, you know, I feel like a lot of these major corporations have lobbied and paid off a lot of people, in government. I feel like that's just is the way it is here.
Well, what's interesting with that is we also more likely than not have the largest fitness industry in the world here.
Yes.
And it failed.
In a large degree it did.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting is like, I feel like I think I heard a statistic that the United States has like around 11% of the world's population, yet we prescribe over 70% of the prescription drugs in the world. Like this is it's very common to take prescription drugs here. It's on commercials everywhere you see. Everywhere, like marketing, pharmaceutical companies, they're marketing. These are very, very smart people. And I'm not saying pharmaceutical companies or drug companies are evil, because they're literally doing what's best for their business to, and to be profitable, because that's their obligation to shareholders.
Yeah. Well, they also save lives too. I mean, so there's that. You're
absolutely right. And I'm not meaning to discount or discredit any of that. It's just, I think with the way the food industry works here and all of the things they allow in the foods here in the United States that are not allowed, they're illegal in other countries. There's a big problem, but I'm hopeful that, things are, on the mend, and I'm not trying to be political at all, but I hope that this new administration, improves the health of Americans. I really do.
Where I was kind of going with that is I like to look things through different lenses and different perspectives is, if we have the largest fitness community, trainers, coaches, all this, than anywhere else in the world, right? Then we have the worst health,
right?
Of anywhere else in the world. Then that whole industry is fucking up.
Yes.
Right? Because that is the counter to all that. So where do you think they're fucking up and can do better? Because it's what I see from the fitness industry is a lot of the pointing.
Yeah.
Right. It's a big food, it's big pharma, it's big this, but they're not pointing back to themselves saying, well, what should we do to be able to make a bigger impact? You get what I'm saying? The accountability, not everybody, I'm talking industry as a whole.
No, absolutely.
Right? And a lot of that industry as a whole is doing a lot of the same slack dick shit that the other industries do.
Right.
With, here's a pill that you can take and lose 30 pounds in fucking a week.
Yep.
Here's a program that you can take to be able to do this and do this.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So where can the industry, what would you think that the industry could do better?
It's hard for me to give you a concrete answer on that. I can only speak for myself, and I feel like I'm just like a grain of sand, in the entire fitness industry. I'm very, very, again, this just all comes back to my personal beliefs, and that's just practicing what you preach, being truly healthy yourself, and doing that for years, and putting out the positive message of hard work, consistency, discipline, and leading by example. And again, I say this with absolute humility. I've always taken a health first approach to my own training and my own fitness. And I believe in, just because I've been training since I was 9 years old, I've always been kind of strong, lean, and pretty fit. And that's what's always worked for me. And it's been, whatever, a 30-year, almost a 25-year endeavor of mine. But it all just kind of comes back to what I said earlier, is like sticking to the basics, lift weights, eat real whole foods, do that, and just reiterate and regurgitate that message over and over and over again. Like, I'm not going to tell anyone, hey, go take this latest supplement, go pop this latest pill, I'm not, I preach a natural lifestyle just because I truly believe that's really probably what's healthiest for most people. And that's what's worked for me. Again, and I'm not a competitive bodybuilder, powerlifter, or strongman. So I just think I take a health first approach, and I just try to do that with my own content and leading by example, and just honestly telling people to be mentally stronger. That's my approach to where I can try to hopefully help and impact people and kind of improve their mindset or the way they think, and like not to take shortcuts. Like, man, do the things you don't want to do. If you actually want to get strong, lean, fit, and healthy, do the hard shit first. Stop looking for shortcuts. That is what I wish more coaches and trainers and people on social media would preach, because there's not a lot of guys out there doing that. I mean, as you know, there's a lot of guys that are just, they're going to push products. They're going to push, they're going to do that kind of thing. Cause that's what they're being paid to do that, and there's a lot of dudes that they're real strong, lean and jacked, but are they really strong, lean and jacked because they actually know what they're doing, because they actually eat healthy and they've trained really hard for a really long time? Or are they taking, some supplements or, anything else, or doing something else to kind of enhance their physique? So there's a lot of, I think, misinformation, maybe a bit of deception going on. And again, I don't mean to talk badly about anyone, but I just try to preach my own message, and I'm not afraid to put out my opinion to anyone,
I think there's another level to this that people miss, is when you are building your client base in person.
Yeah.
Your number one way to build clients was through the in-person referrals.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't really matter what you do online. You can do whatever you want. That's where you're going to build your client base from.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know how many coaches, trainers there are in the U.S. I'm just going to throw a fucked up number out because I don't know. So let's say there's 10 million, right? Yeah. Which I don't fucking know. It's probably way too high. But if the 10 million all have just one client, and they actually gave a fuck about the client, and we're actually really invested in the client's success and their health, then we have 20 million healthy people.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the trainer's healthy.
Yes.
And that's just one client.
Yes.
Right? So if we expand that, now they have two clients, right? Ripple effect. And then that client gets in way better health, then their friends are going to see it, their family are going to see it.
Absolutely.
Then there's an exponential effect.
Absolutely.
Right? So when we distill that all back, I wonder how many of these people who are working with clients give a fuck enough about the actual client to make the changes that need to be made. Because if we take that 10 million, then it becomes 20 million.
Right.
Then it becomes 40 million.
Yep.
Then there's that impact.
Absolutely.
I think something's broken there across the board. Not all, right?
Yeah.
Not all.
Yeah.
But across the board, something's broken with that first pillar.
It very well could be. And I feel like that's why, before this podcast started, I feel like there's not a lot of individuals in this industry that I look up to, admire, or respect. There's very few. And I really feel like those individuals have stood the test of time, and they've been doing it for a while because they truly care. They probably truly cared about that first client they had, and they've taken that same level of caring and passion, and they've just, built that. And again, like, I don't know how this is a problem that's, I'm not sure one person can solve this. I feel like it's going to take, many, many people. And in my opinion, being a coach or a trainer is the greatest, most fulfilling job in the world. Like, I feel like being a coach or a trainer is even more important than being a doctor, because doctors, they treat people that are sick. A coach or a trainer can prevent someone from getting sick in the first place. And if you can just help and inspire someone to be healthier, be a better version of themselves, and to live a healthy lifestyle, and that person goes on to inspire some other person. Like, my favorite people to work with are actually fellow coaches and trainers that, that get value out of my content or my message. And I love helping other coaches and trainers because I know it makes me feel good, because I know I'm actually making the world a better and healthier place. And so, I feel like it's going to take all of us, and everyone's going to do their own thing. But in my opinion, man, just leading by example, practicing what you preach, and sticking to your values and what you believe in, that's always been very important to me. And that's always been my approach.
How can people go about finding you?
The easiest way, I would say, you can find me on YouTube at Tanner Shuck, also on Instagram, Tanner Shuck, my website, truestrength.co, and they can reach out to me. Email me too, tanner@truestrength.co. But I would probably say the first place is, if you don't know anything about me or you want to learn what I'm about, just go find me, go search my name on YouTube, and just consume any of my most recent YouTube videos, and you'll very quickly learn what I'm about.
Do you have any final thoughts as we close up?
The only thought I have is I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me here. It's an honor and a privilege to be sitting across the table from you. And I want to thank you for the indelible impacts you've made on the world of strength and conditioning.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This has been great. We're done. All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.